I stood in that cold kitchen, staring at the flickering candles, and realized the man I called my husband saw me only as a liability. "You will never reach my level," he said, his voice as cold and precise as a terminated contract. "You should just stop trying." His words didn't make me cry. They made me reprogram. He wanted silence. I would show him just how expensive absolute compliance could be. By the time he realized I held the key, I'd already changed the locks. My name is Avery Sinclair, and on the night my marriage ended, the coq au vin had been cold for 4 hours. Julian was late, as usual, but this was a new record. I had arranged the table with our good plates, the ones we never used, and a single candle that had burned down to a sad, waxy puddle. This was supposed to be a celebration, a small one, for a small achievement, but mine nonetheless. I had finally received my certification in operational strategy analysis. It was a mouthful, I know, but it was a step up, a piece of paper that proved I was more than just a cog in the machine at the National Infrastructure Review Board. When the front door finally opened, Julian Vance strode in like a conquering hero returning from a battle he had single-handedly won. He was still wearing his suit, the dark gray one that made him look like he was carved from granite, and his tie was still knotted perfectly at his throat. He didn't look at the table. He barely looked at me. His gaze swept across the room, cataloging its contents as assets and liabilities. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice flat. He dropped his briefcase by the door, the sound echoing in the silence. "I finished my course," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "I got the certificate. I thought we could celebrate." He finally looked at the table, a flicker of something annoyance, maybe pity in his eyes. He scoffed, a quiet, brutal sound. "You're celebrating that, Avery. My bonus this year is projected to be 7 figures. 7. And you're lighting candles for a piece of paper that keeps you in a $70,000 a year job. It's embarrassing." The words landed like stones in the quiet room. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I felt a strange and terrifying calm settle over me, a clarity so sharp it hurt. This was it, the final line drawn. He walked past me, heading for the stairs. "You're a social liability," he said over his shoulder, each word a perfectly polished dart. "I can't believe I stooped to marrying you. From now on, let me decide when we should talk." He expected a scene. He was probably already bracing for the tears, the pleading, the predictable storm he knew so well how to weather. But it never came. Instead, I carefully blew out the candle. I scraped the cold food from the plates into the trash with methodical, steady hands. I washed the dishes, dried them, and put them back in the cupboard, my movements precise and economical. I was not a grieving wife. I was an analyst, clearing a scene, removing all evidence of a failed experiment. I would not fight him. I would obey. He wanted distance. He would get a chasm. He wanted me to stop trying. I would become a ghost in my own home. I didn't sleep in our bed that night. I took a blanket to the sofa in the living room and opened my laptop. It wasn't a diary I started, but a log, an encrypted file, time-stamped. I typed his exact words, verbatim. "You're a social liability. I can't believe I stooped to marrying you. Let me decide when we should talk." It wasn't journaling, it was evidence collection. Then, I opened a new browser tab. I typed the name Patricia Reyes. The search results bloomed on the screen, a top-tier family law attorney, renowned for her work in high-asset divorces. Her website specifically mentioned cases involving spousal contribution to professional advancement. A bitter smile touched my lips. I remembered the years I worked 2 jobs bartending at night after my day job so he could study for his CFA exams without the burden of a 9-to-5. I remembered typing his resumes, coaching him for interviews, celebrating his first big promotion at Meriden Capital Group while my own ambitions were carefully packed away and stored in the attic of our life together. He had forgotten that investment. I would make sure the final accounting was deadly accurate. The next morning, I was up before him. I made coffee, just enough for one. I toasted one slice of bread and ate it standing at the counter. When Julian came downstairs, dressed in another impeccable suit, he stopped short. He looked at the empty coffee pot, the single-used plate in the sink. The confusion on his face was a small, satisfying fissure in his perfect facade. "No coffee?" he asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. I turned from the sink, giving him a calm, pleasant smile. It was the same smile I gave my colleagues in meetings. Polite, distant, impenetrable. "I'm respecting the boundaries you set," I said. "You wanted to decide when we talk." I assumed that extended to everything else. My compliance began the next day. It was not a rebellion, but a strategic withdrawal, a systematic dismantling of the invisible scaffolding that held Julian's life together. I stopped performing the duties of a wife because he had made it clear I was merely a resident. The social calendar, once my domain, became a blank slate. Dinners with his colleagues, charity events, his parents' anniversary, they all evaporated from my mind. When he asked one evening where his gray suit was, the one he needed from the dry cleaner, I simply looked up from my laptop. "I don't know. Julian, you'll have to check your claim ticket." The river of his custom-tailored shirts, which had once flowed from the hamper to the dry cleaner and back to the closet under my silent management, ran dry. The refrigerator, once stocked with the artisanal cheeses and expensive Greek yogurt he favored, slowly reverted to my simpler tastes. I shopped for one, cooked for one, and cleaned up after one. Our home became two separate territories operating under a cold truce. My first covert operation was financial. I opened a new savings account at a different bank, a simple online process that took less than 10 minutes. I redirected a small portion of my salary to be deposited there directly. It wasn't much, but it was mine, untraceable and untouchable. Then, I became a quiet thief in my own home. In the evenings, while Julian was sealed in his home office on late-night calls, I began methodically downloading our shared financial history. Every credit card bill, every mortgage statement, every investment portfolio update from the last 5 years. Each PDF was copied and dragged onto an encrypted USB drive no bigger than my thumb. It was my second logbook, a story told in numbers and transactions. I reclaimed my time with the same quiet efficiency. I called Serena, my best friend from college, the one I had let drift away because Julian found her unrefined. Her voice on the phone was like finding a key to a room I'd forgotten existed. Serena was a social media analyst, a digital ghost who could find patterns in the noise of the internet. We met for coffee, then dinner. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I just told her I was taking back my evenings. She understood immediately. Those evenings were now mine to invest. Instead of simmering a sauce for Julian's dinner, I was enrolled in an advanced cybersecurity course at the local university. The complex code and digital defense strategies felt clean, logical. It was a world of rules and consequences, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of my marriage. I was sharpening a skill set Julian didn't even know I possessed. The cracks in his perfect world began to show. Small at first. A frantic call one morning because he'd missed a breakfast meeting he swore I was supposed to remind him about. A muffled curse from the kitchen when he discovered the absence of his favorite yogurt. The day he came home fuming because he'd had to present at Meriden in a shirt that was clearly wrinkled was a small, quiet victory. Through it all, I remained placid. Our interactions were brief, polite, and completely devoid of emotion. I spoke to him as I would a distant colleague. "Good morning, Julian. Did you need something? Please close the door on your way out." He would stare at me, searching for the anger, the hurt, the woman he knew how to manage. He found nothing but a calm, professional stranger. This newfound energy bled into my work at the NERB. I volunteered to take over a stalled data analysis project, a knot of logistical problems that everyone else had avoided. I spent my lunches and evenings untangling it, creating a new framework for assessing infrastructure vulnerabilities. I worked with a focus I hadn't had in years. My director noticed. My name started appearing on commendation emails. I was building a case for myself, professionally and personally. The turning point came during a presentation of my project findings to the board. It was the most important meeting of my career. My laptop was connected to the main screen, my analysis displayed for a dozen senior executives. My phone, set on the table beside me, buzzed. Julian's name flashed across the screen. He was breaking his own rule. In the past, I would have panicked, silenced it, and worried about his anger later. This time, I didn't even pause in my speech. With one smooth motion, I tapped the screen, declining the call. A second later, my preset auto-reply was sent to him. It was a message I had crafted with surgical precision. It was short, professional, and utterly devastating. It read, "I am currently unavailable. I am respecting the communication protocol you established. The discovery was an accident. I was searching our shared cloud storage for an old tax document, a digital needle in a haystack of decade-old files. That's when I saw it a misfiled folder labeled Career Consulting. Inside was a single email chain from 6 months prior. The recipient was a high-level executive coach I'd never heard of. The sender was Julian. My blood ran cold as I read. It was a strategy memo, written in his detached corporate prose. He wasn't discussing his strengths or weaknesses. He was outlining a problem. I was the problem. He described me as a domestic headwind, a non-strategic asset that needed to be managed until his primary objective was achieved: his promotion to senior partner at Meriden. The plan was laid out with chilling clarity. He would maintain the facade of a stable marriage to project the right image to the firm's conservative leadership. He would leverage my quiet, unambitious nature to his advantage, painting a picture for his colleagues of a dedicated husband supporting a simple wife who was trying to keep up. And then, once the partnership was secured, he would initiate a controlled separation. He had designated me a hurdle to be cleared and discarded. It wasn't just contempt. It was a calculated, long-term strategy of manipulation. The casual cruelty of his words that night wasn't an outburst. It was a planned move, a deliberate step in a game I never knew I was playing. I wasn't his wife. I was a placeholder, a prop for his ambition. The hurt I felt was quickly replaced by something harder, colder. The analyst in me took over. This was no longer a broken heart. It was a hostile takeover, and I had just found the opposition's playbook. With a steady hand, I saved a copy of the email to my encrypted drive. Then I turned my attention to the financial records I had already secured. If he was capable of this level of deception, the email was just the beginning. I applied the same analytical rigor I used at the NIRB, searching for anomalies in our spending patterns. It didn't take long to find it a recurring monthly charge for $1,500 to a property management company. It wasn't for our mortgage or any property we officially owned. The transactions began just over 6 months ago. A quick search of the company led me to a portfolio of high-end, short-term corporate apartment leases. The address was in the heart of the financial district, less than a mile from Julian's office. He had another life, another space, paid for with our shared money. I took screenshots of everything: the transactions, the property company's website, a map showing the proximity to Meriden Capital. I attached the files to an encrypted email and sent them to Patricia Reyes with a simple subject line, "Evidence of deliberate misconduct." Her reply came within the hour. "This is excellent, Avery. This is not just infidelity. This is a deliberate attempt to conceal and dissipate marital assets. It establishes a pattern of deceit. We can use this." She recommended a private investigator, a retired police detective named Frank. I called him the next day. "I need you to verify who is using this apartment," I told him, my voice even and calm. "I don't care if he's sleeping with someone. That's not the point. I need documentation that he has established a separate residence, that he is using marital funds to maintain a life he has hidden from me." Proving an affair was emotional. Proving a hidden financial life was a legal kill shot. Meanwhile, Julian began to notice my silence in a new way. The initial arrogance was giving way to a faint, gnawing anxiety. He started making clumsy attempts to breach the wall between us. "Weather is supposed to be nice this weekend," He'd offer to my back as I worked on my laptop. Or, did you see that the market was up today? He was trying to engage me on his terms, to pull me back into his orbit without ever having to apologize or acknowledge his own decree. He still believed he was in control, that this was a temporary freeze-out, a childish sulk I would eventually tire of. He had no idea that I wasn't sulking. I was building a case, and I had just found my star witness. In Patricia Reyes's office, the air smelled of expensive leather and steel. I didn't present my case as a scorned wife. I presented it as a senior analyst. "He's arrogant," I said, sliding the printed email across her polished desk. "He believes he's smarter than everyone, including his own firm's compliance department. His personal life is sloppy, and I'm betting his professional life is too. That's his vulnerability." Patricia read the email, her expression unreadable. "This proves intent to defraud you. Avery, it's a strong start, but attacking him professionally is risky. Meriden Capital has very deep pockets. I'm not attacking Meriden." I corrected her. "I'm assessing risk. Julian is a risk they haven't properly calculated." I went home and dedicated my evenings to a new project. My cybersecurity course had given me the framework, and Julian's ego had provided the target. I reviewed the public filings for the last 3 M&A deals he had supervised. On the third one, I found it. It wasn't a glaring, fireable offense. It was a small technical breach in data compliance regarding the transfer of European customer data. He had cut a corner, likely to push the deal through before the quarter's end, creating a tiny, ticking time bomb of reputational risk for Meriden. It was exactly the kind of nuanced, disastrous error that a board of directors hates. I documented the flaw, cited the specific international statutes he had ignored, and saved it to my encrypted drive. My next step was logistical. I leased a small 1-bedroom apartment near the NIRB offices, paying the deposit and 3 months' rent from my new account. I began to move my life, piece by piece. I used my work briefcase and a large gym bag. One day, I took my personal files and my degree. The next, I packed my grandmother's jewelry and my best-loved books. I took the art from the walls that I had purchased, leaving blank spaces he never seemed to notice. He was too consumed by his own problems. An emergency internal audit on data security had been launched at Meriden, and Julian was frantic, working late, his temper shorter than ever. The real twist came from Serena. She called me, furious. "I had lunch with Sarah Miller," she said, naming one of the friends in Julian's orbit. "You need to know. Julian has been telling people you're having some kind of breakdown. That you're acting cold and unstable. He's poisoning the well. Avery, he's trying to discredit you before you can even make a move. He was building a narrative that I was the liability, the unstable wife. It was a classic, despicable move, and it was going to fail." "Serena," I said, my voice perfectly calm, "you're a social media analyst. Let's give them a counter-narrative." 2 days later, my long-dormant social media accounts came to life. Serena posted a photo of us at a packed wine bar, smiling, me looking relaxed and happy. She tagged old college friends. The next night, I posted a photo from my cybersecurity class, a shot of a complex algorithm on a whiteboard, with the caption, "Never Stop Learning." Serena's network went to work, amplifying the images. The message was subtle but clear. Avery Sinclair was not breaking down. She was booked, busy, and upgrading her life. My final move was to secure my time. I met with my director at the NIRB and formally requested a 1-month unpaid leave of absence, effective immediately, citing a pressing family matter. Given the success of my recent project, he granted it without hesitation. I now had 1 month of total, uninterrupted focus. I sat in my new apartment, the city lights spread out below me. I opened my laptop and began to draft the divorce proposal. It was a work of art. I didn't just ask for half of our current assets. I attached my analysis of his projected partnership bonus, the 7-figure sum he had dangled over my head. I built my case using his own industry's language, citing the theory of marital asset value growth attributable to spousal support. I included a meticulously detailed spreadsheet calculating the money I had earned to support him during his CFA studies, compounded by interest, and the estimated value of the career advancement I had sacrificed to manage his. I was demanding a significant portion of the future he had tried to steal from me. He had judged my quiet life. Now he would pay for his loud mistakes. Without my invisible support structure, Julian began to fray at the edges. The man who prided himself on his immaculate presentation started showing up to work with a hint of stubble, his expensive shirts looking like he'd slept in them. Piles of takeout containers overflowed the kitchen trash can, and I could see the dark circles under his eyes deepen from the compounded stress of his audit at work and having to manage a life he had never learned to navigate. He was a brilliant M&A specialist who couldn't figure out the trash collection schedule. The breaking point was, fittingly, the coffee machine. It was a sleek, complicated German model that cost over $2,000, a gift from his parents that I had meticulously cleaned and descowled for 3 years. One morning, I was in the living room, reading a book, when a string of frustrated curses echoed from the kitchen. I heard a loud bang, followed by a furious roar. I didn't move. After a moment, Julian appeared in the doorway, his face red with fury. "The coffee machine is broken," he announced, as if I were the on-call technician. "That's unfortunate," I said, not looking up from my page. He stood there, waiting. When it became clear I was not going to leap up and fix it, he spent the next 30 minutes clattering through drawers, presumably looking for the user manual I kept in the top left-hand drawer of the kitchen island. He eventually gave up, storming out of the house without his morning espresso. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a text from him. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a question about the coffee machine. It was a command disguised as a request. "The utility bill is past due. Handle it." I let the message sit for an hour before I replied. My response was a single, perfect text. "Per your communication protocol, I will await your formal decision on when we should speak. Regarding the bill, you can contact customer service at the number listed on the invoice." The fallout was immediate. Julian, deprived of caffeine and sleep, and now saddled with basic life administration, was making mistakes. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he had received a quiet word from one of the senior partners at Meriden about his increasingly disheveled appearance and a missed deadline on a minor report. It was the first dent in his professional armor, and it had been inflicted by a utility bill and a broken appliance. He was also making mistakes in judgment. A junior colleague of his, a ruthlessly ambitious woman named Melissa, had started hovering around him, offering to grab him coffee, helping organize his files. Serena told me Julian had mentioned her, convinced this woman was genuinely interested in him. He saw it as a potential upgrade, a new, supportive partner. I knew Melissa. I knew she was a shark who smelled blood in the water, a corporate climber who saw Julian's personal chaos as a professional opportunity. He was so blinded by his own ego he couldn't see he was being played. The most critical piece of information, however, came from Frank, the private investigator. His report landed in my encrypted inbox, short and to the point. The apartment wasn't for a mistress. It was a ghost office. Frank's surveillance photos showed Julian entering and leaving with a briefcase, never with another person. He had run a check on the LLC that leased the unit. It was a shell company. Julian had set up an off-the-books workspace to conduct business and store sensitive documents outside of Meriden's server and internal oversight. He wasn't cheating on me. He was cheating on his firm. It was 1,000 times better. This wasn't just marital misconduct. It was a potential breach of contract, a violation of his fiduciary duty to his employer. That was the final piece I needed. That afternoon, I had a locksmith come to the house. I had the locks on every door changed. Then I drove to my new apartment. I sat down and typed a short, formal letter. It informed Julian that I had moved out and that the locks had been changed for my security. It also stated, very clearly, that as a legal co-owner of the property, I retained a key and the right to access the premises at any time. I sent it to his office via courier, to be delivered the following morning. He was no longer just dealing with a cold wife. He was locked out of his own house. The next phase of the operation required a scalpel, not a hammer. I met Serena at a quiet cafe far from our usual spots. I didn't show her Frank's report or mention the ghost office. Instead, I presented myself as a concerned, estranged wife. "I'm worried about him." "Serena," I said, stirring my tea. "With this internal audit at Meriden, he's under incredible pressure. He's not sleeping. He's frantic. I know he's been working from a private space sometimes, just to get away from the office politics. I hope he's being careful. You know how sensitive those M&A documents are." I had planted the seed. Serena, a professional who understood the value and danger of information, was instantly alert. I knew her ethics, and I knew her network. I didn't have to ask her to do anything. Her instincts would take over. 2 days later, it happened. She forwarded me a link without comment. It was to a niche financial blog, one read religiously by industry insiders for its sharp, anonymous commentary. The headline was subtle but devastating. "Data security jitters at Meriden sources whisper of internal risk." The article didn't name Julian. It didn't need to. It spoke of high-level executives at the firm potentially using unsecured off-site locations to handle sensitive client data, raising questions about Meriden's compliance protocols in the face of intense internal pressure. It was a perfectly crafted piece of corporate insinuation. The dominoes began to fall. The blog post, though small, was a spark in a tinderbox. Meriden's potential partners and current clients would have seen it. The board of directors, already on edge from the internal audit, moved to contain the potential damage. The investigation, which had been a general data security review, was immediately refocused, and its first subject was Julian Vance, the senior expert overseeing their most sensitive current deals. I received a panicked call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Julian's lawyer. He informed me that Julian had been summoned to an emergency meeting with the board and legal counsel. His company-issued laptop and phone had been confiscated for forensic analysis. He hadn't even been served divorce papers yet, and his career was already imploding. That night, from the quiet of my new apartment, I watched the activity on our shared cloud drive. It was a system I had set up years ago, a simple automatic backup for all our devices to a central, secure location. In his panic, Julian had done exactly what I predicted. He had tried to cover his tracks. A flurry of deletion notifications appeared, files related to the LLC for the ghost office, scanned documents, spreadsheets. He was trying to erase his secret life from his personal computer, not realizing that every keystroke was being preserved in a digital amber he could no longer access. I logged in, changed the password, and locked him out of his own history. The next morning, his lawyer called again. His tone was different now. The professional bluster was gone, replaced by a tense urgency. He demanded an immediate in-person meeting to discuss the pending marital dissolution. "Of course," Patricia Reyes replied on my behalf when I patched her in. "My office, tomorrow at 10? The battlefield was set. I spent the rest of the day not compiling evidence of his cruelty or my emotional distress, but preparing a clean, concise legal summary. It was 1 page long. It didn't mention the words affair or heartbreak. It focused exclusively on a single legal concept: Julian Vance's flagrant violation of his fiduciary duty to his spouse. By intentionally concealing marital assets in a shell company, and by executing a premeditated plan to defraud me of my share in the value of his career, a career I had financially and domestically supported, he had committed a breach of trust not just as a husband, but as a financial partner. I was no longer the wife he held in contempt. I was the co-investor he had tried to swindle. Julian looked smaller in Patricia Reyes's conference room. The bespoke suit was still perfect, but it hung on a frame that seemed to have shrunk. He sat beside his lawyer, a man with a tired, professional face, and tried to project the same air of authority he carried into his board meetings at Meriden. He was treating this like a hostile negotiation, and he was about to make his opening offer. His lawyer did the talking, his voice a smooth, practiced drone. Julian was prepared to be generous, he said. For a clean, quick, and quiet dissolution of the marriage, he was offering a one-time payment of $100,000, along with a standard non-disclosure agreement. He was trying to liquidate a bad investment, and he expected me to be grateful for the terms. Patricia simply smiled. It was a light, cold sound that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't respond to the offer. Instead, she slid a slim binder across the mahogany table. "Exhibit A," she said calmly, "is a detailed accounting of my client's financial contributions to Mr. Vance's education and early career, without which his current earning potential would be significantly diminished." She then slid a single piece of paper over. It was a printed copy of his email to the career coach. She had highlighted a single phrase in yellow, a non-strategic asset to be managed and discarded. Julian's lawyer's face tightened. Julian just stared at the paper, his mask of control finally cracking. This wasn't the negotiation he had planned. He wasn't dealing with his emotional, unambitious wife anymore. He was dealing with an analyst who had kept meticulous records. Then, Julian finally broke. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table, and spoke directly to me for the first time. "This is bigger than you understand, Avery," he hissed, his voice low and urgent. "This isn't just about us anymore." He revealed that Meriden was under informal investigation by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission regarding a leveraged buyout from 2 years ago. "The firm is protecting its own," he said, "and right now, that includes me. But if this divorce gets ugly, if my name is dragged through the mud, they will cut me loose to save themselves. The partnership, the bonus, all of it disappears. We both walk away with nothing." He thought it was a threat. He thought the specter of the SEC and the loss of all his future earnings would terrify me into submission, force me back into the role of the compliant, silent partner. A profound silence fell over the room as his words sank in. But I wasn't terrified. I was enlightened. My work at the National Infrastructure Review Board had taught me one critical thing about government agencies. They don't just investigate balance sheets. They investigate character. A high-flying executive in the middle of a messy, contentious divorce, with allegations of deceit and hidden assets to a regulator, that's not a personal problem. It's a flashing red light, a signal of poor judgment and a potential risk to the firm. He hadn't given me a threat. He had given me a weapon. I spoke for the first time, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the tense air. I looked directly at Julian. "There will be no agreement," I announced. "I will not sign any settlement, or any NDA, until the full, unredacted results of Meriden's internal audit are made public." His jaw dropped. His lawyer looked at me as if I had just pulled the pin from a grenade. I had just shackled his professional survival to our divorce proceedings. He now had 2 clocks ticking, and each one was counting down to his destruction. The call came 3 hours later. It was his personal cell, a number I hadn't seen in months. I let it ring 3 times before answering. His voice was unrecognizable. The cold, dismissive baritone was gone, replaced by a strained, desperate plea. "Avery, please," he stammered. "We need to talk. Just you and me. We can solve this little problem privately." I let the silence hang for a moment, savoring the complete reversal of power. The man who had commanded me to wait for his permission to speak was now begging for an audience. "You said you would decide when we talk, Julian," I said, my voice as calm and flat as the day he broke me. "I've decided that time is not now." I ended the call. He didn't wait for my permission. The next day, he brought the war to my territory. I was on my lunch break, discussing a data flowchart with my director, when the receptionist buzzed my desk. Her voice was tight with secondhand embarrassment. "Avery, Mr. Vance is in the lobby. He's rather insistent on seeing you." My director, a kind, no-nonsense man named Robert, raised an eyebrow. The National Infrastructure Review Board was a secure federal building. Insistent meant he had bypassed the standard appointment protocol and was causing a scene. I walked out to the atrium lobby, my heels clicking on the marble floor. My colleagues were peering over their cubicle walls, and there he was, a complete aberration in our quiet, government beige world. Julian, in his $3,000 suit, which was deeply wrinkled across the back, his hair uncombed. He was holding an enormous, gaudy bouquet of at least 4 dozen red roses, the kind you buy out of sheer panic. The security guard at the front desk looked deeply unhappy. When he saw me, he rushed forward, adopting a mask of tragic contrition. It was a performance, and a bad one. "Avery," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thank God. I had to see you." He thrust the roses at me. "I am so sorry," he proclaimed. "The pressure at work, this SEC thing. I've been a monster. I said silly, awful things. I didn't mean any of it." I looked at the roses, then at his desperate, bloodshot eyes. I did not take the bouquet. "Please don't make a scene here. Julian," I said, my voice low and steady, forcing him to quiet down. "What you said wasn't silly. It was intentional. You wrote it down. You planned it." His face twitched. The apology was failing. He switched to negotiation. "Okay, fine," he hissed, dropping the flowers onto a lobby chair. "Listen to me. This is about survival. You've made your point. You're smart. I get it. Now, name your price. An extra 100,000, 200, whatever you want, outside the divorce settlement, wired to any account you choose. Just call off your lawyer, withdraw the petition, and help me clean this mess up. Tell Meriden I'm stable. Tell them we are stable." I almost laughed. He was trying to buy me, right here in the lobby of a federal building, surrounded by my professional life. This was the man who had called me a liability. "The mess, Julian," I asked, matching his low tone. "You mean the fact that Meriden Capital is reconsidering your partnership bid, or the fact that your frantic appearance here, in a secure government facility, is only confirming every rumor that you've become professionally unstable?" I saw Robert, my director, listening from the edge of the atrium. He was no longer curious. He looked concerned. Julian had just proven my entire case. I took a small step closer, so only he could hear me. "Let me ask you a question, Julian. It's the only one that matters. Are you here, with these ridiculous flowers, because you love me? Or are you here because someone at Meriden finally told you that a messy, contested divorce with allegations of hidden assets will permanently destroy your career?" His face went blank. The calculating M&A mind behind his eyes was spinning, trying to find the right answer, the strategic move. And there was none. He couldn't lie, and the truth was devastating. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. Stability," he finally stammered. "I just need stability." I nodded. It was the only honest thing he'd said in months. "You said I wasn't on your level," I said, my voice clear and final, loud enough for the guard and my director to hear. "I agree. I have no interest in stooping to yours." I turned my back on him and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the lobby, surrounded by the wreckage of his life and a pile of dying roses. The final meeting was a capitulation dressed as a negotiation. Julian showed up with a new lawyer, a sharp, silver-haired woman whose eyes held no illusions. She was a closer, hired to cut the firm's losses. She had clearly advised him to stop the bleeding. This time, I led the presentation. Patricia placed a projector on the table. My first slide wasn't a photo of our wedding, it was a valuation model. "This is my analysis of your projected partnership compensation," I said, my voice as neutral as if I were at the NERB. "Based on the 3 deals you're currently structuring, your 7-figure bonus is a conservative estimate. My calculations put the immediate value closer to 8. I laid out my methodology, the risk adjustments, the market comparisons." Julian just stared at the screen, his face pale. I was using his own language to dismantle him. "Given my financial and domestic contributions that enabled your career trajectory, Outlined in Exhibit A, I am demanding 60% of the forthcoming bonus, in addition to the standard 50% of all current assets. Julian's new lawyer started to speak, but I was already moving to the next slide. It was a map showing the proximity of the ghost office to Meriden Capital. Exhibit B, I said. Proof of a concealed marital asset. A short-term lease paid for from a joint account, hidden under a shell LLC. My final slide was a collection of screenshots Frank's surveillance photos of Julian entering the apartment with his work briefcase, and a sample of the Meriden-sensitive documents I had recovered from the cloud backup he tried to delete. And Exhibit C, I said. Evidence that this concealed asset was being used to store confidential client materials in direct violation of Meriden's internal security protocols and, quite possibly, SEC regulations on data handling. A stunned silence filled the room. Julian's lawyer looked at him with open contempt. She now understood the real threat. Patricia Reyes leaned forward, her voice soft but final. So, here are the terms. If Mr. Vance chooses to contest this valuation, we will be forced to submit Exhibit C directly to Meriden's general counsel as part of our discovery. We will also, of course, be obligated to explore whether this personal chaos and breach of security constitutes a material risk that must be disclosed to the SEC. His career will not survive the inquiry. Julian looked broken. You did this, he whispered, staring at me. It's already done. Julian, I said. The final twist. I couldn't risk you trying to bury this. Last week, I sent an anonymous, summary-level report to Meriden's managing partner. It didn't mention our divorce. It simply outlined a critical compliance and judgment risk posed by a senior M&A specialist. Your file was already flagged. Your behavior in my lobby just confirmed their worst fears. He finally understood. I hadn't destroyed him with tears or a screaming match. I had destroyed him with a risk assessment. The very tool he worshipped, the cold, detached logic he prided himself on, was the knife I had just twisted in his back. His lawyer spoke, her voice clipped. We accept the terms. The agreement was brutal. He would pay everything. He would liquidate his stock options to pay the lump sum. And he would sign a separate check for the full, outstanding balance of the student loans I had taken out in my name to pay for his CFA exams, a sum of nearly $40,000. After his lawyer had stepped out to take a call, he looked at me, his eyes hollow. Why? Avery, he asked, his voice barely audible. Why go this far? Why not just take the money and go? I stood up, gathering my files. I looked down at the man who had called me a liability. I'm just ensuring my value is correctly calculated. Julian, I said, according to the exact principles of finance and risk that you worship, the papers were signed. The wire transfer hit my new account. A number so large it felt abstract, unreal. It was enough to pay off every cent of debt I had ever incurred, including the ones I took on for him. It was enough to buy the small penthouse I wanted in the city center, and it was enough to seed an investment fund that meant I would never have to depend on anyone else's salary again. Julian Vance did not get his partnership. The combination of the internal compliance risk, the external SEC pressure, and the blatant instability he had displayed was too much for Meriden's conservative leadership. He wasn't fired, not officially. That would have been too messy. Instead, he was quietly reassigned, demoted to a non-client-facing role in strategic analysis, a corporate purgatory where they sent partners in waiting to die. He kept his title, but he lost his future. I didn't go back to the NERB. My leave of absence became a formal resignation. Instead, I leased a small, sleek office and hung a simple plaque on the door, Sinclair Risk Advisory. I specialize in personal and professional risk analysis for women in high-stakes finance. I teach them how to audit their lives, how to spot vulnerabilities, and how to protect their assets from men who see them as liabilities. My experience became my business model. My new apartment is small, but it's all windows, overlooking the entire city. The simple dreams Julian used to mock my love for quiet mornings. My minimalist aesthetic are now my luxury. The furniture is elegant, understated, and chosen by me. There is no trace of him, no memory of his cold pronouncements. It is a space built on my success, not his. Serena and my old friends, the ones he tried to isolate me from, are my unofficial board of directors. We have dinner once a week, and they celebrate my new clients with a fierce, protective joy. I am finally seen for my discipline and my sharpness. The final, pathetic epilogue came 3 months later. An email from an unfamiliar personal address appeared in my inbox. It was from Julian. He wasn't begging for me to come back. He wasn't apologizing. He was asking for a professional consultation. He laid out his situation, the demotion, the reputational damage in his old, detached prose. He wanted to know if I had any strategic advice on how he could rebuild his personal brand. I stared at the message. He still didn't understand. He still couldn't see that I was the one who had written his risk assessment. He was a bad investment, and I had simply cut my losses. I deleted the email without a reply. I realized, in that moment, that revenge wasn't about watching him burn. It was the complete, total, and blissful indifference to whether he was burning or not. I'm sitting in my new home now, watching the sunrise turn the skyscrapers from gray to gold. I'm drinking a cup of very expensive coffee, the kind I bought for myself, in the absolute quiet. The greatest victory wasn't the money. It was the silence, the peace. It was the profound, unshakable knowledge that I had taken back control of my own story. My value was never his to determine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment below and let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. And if you want to support us, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.